What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Turn on the Jets Live. I'm your host, Steven Zantz, joined by my co-host, Russo. It's been a while. I know some people have missed us. I'm sure some people are happy they haven't seen our faces. Russo, how you doing, bud?
I'm hanging in there, man. The worst season in my entire fandom has come to an end, and here we are. We're back in the off season where we're kings. We never lose. The Jets never fail to disappoint with at least newsworthy everything. But I'm doing well, man. It's good to be back with you. How you doing?
I'm doing well, too. Guess what today is? Even though you were the one who reminded me, even though I did know this morning, but tell the audience if they don't remember.
So it's the 14-year anniversary of the Jets' last playoff win, but that big divisional win in New England, which was the best win of my life. Obviously, I think probably you too. We were kind of just chatting before. Like, if you had to say your top three Jets victories of your lifetime that you've actually seen, what would they be?
So it's definitely that game is number one. It's not even close, which is sad that I could just think of it that quickly and not even have to go back in the archives. Whew. Okay. I would also say same season when they went into Buffalo and I think it was 2010, and it was we weren't sure how good they really were that season, and then they beat them by 30 points in 2010.
Yep.
And then honestly, it's the same era. The last game at the old stadium when they won 38-0, when the win in their end with Rex. Those are the top three I could think of. I'm sure there's some other good ones.
Yeah.
But for me, those are the most fun wins because I wasn't as close to the team in the early 2000s. I was a Jets fan, but I wasn't so invested. I really got invested towards the end of Pennington when I was getting close to high school and started playing fantasy football. But obviously I remember the Doug Bryan game and everything. We don't need to talk about that. But I will pass it over to you because I know your fandom stretches a little bit further than me. I'm not trying to age you, but you obviously remember the 90s teams.
Yep.
And probably a little bit of the 80s teams, maybe. But what are your top three?
Yeah, so I think obviously the New England win in New England is top for me. It's the best win of my lifetime. And to think of how that game started, right? David Harris gets that huge pick, runs it back, runs out of gas, inexplicably. I feel like he could have scored on that one, but I think Algie Crumpler, of all people, runs him down, right? And the Jets stall. I think they go 3 and out, and Nick Folk misses a field goal. And every Jets fan, myself, my father included, are just oh, here we go again. Those are the opportunities that you always miss against New England. You leave the door open, and it comes back to bite you in the ass. But for some reason, the Jets just stayed on them all game long, and they kept making play after play after play and come out with a victory. And that 28-21 score wasn't as close as it was. The Jets dominated that game. So for them to do that against the 14-2 team in their house after losing 45-3, 6 weeks before that, was just incredible. You can't write a better story than that. And I was convinced we were winning the Super Bowl that year. And then the next week happened, and there you are. I would say my other two favorites, I say number 2 is probably that 98 divisional win at home against Jacksonville. That was incredible. Keyshawn had a receiving touchdown, a rushing touchdown, and an interception on a Hail Mary in that game. Incredible. And a home W, 12-4. I mean, again, that was another one. I was convinced we were winning the Super Bowl that year too. I'd say, there's other ones that go in there, but I would say the 2002 wild card win against Indy, winning 41-0 on that run. That was just something special. That last home playoff game was just incredible. And I wish I had known at that point, how spoiled I truly was.
Yeah.
But it was a fun run for, I peaked 97 to 2010. I was kind of hitting my prime. 97, I was 12, and the Jets got good. They got Parcells, and then we had a really good stretch there. And these last 14 years have been tough, but at least we have those memories to think back on. But we got a GM and a head coach search that we're in the midst of. So let's dig into that, man. I'm ready.
Yeah, I know that's what people who are tuning in or watching, listening definitely care about. But we want to talk about that because it is the anniversary of our favorite Jets game in the history of not the history of the franchise, because I'd probably say 1969, but we were both not born yet, but in our lifetimes. And 2002 is a good one. I obviously do remember that game, but I wasn't as invested, so it didn't mean as much to me. But I was 10 years old at the time, so I feel that's why I didn't have the appreciation that I probably would if I was, a 33-year-old man when that game happened. But yeah, that game was really damn impressive. So we do have some coaches to talk about. We're not going to get into all of them because there's, the Jets are basically interviewing anybody who has a pulse in the NFL, whether they're a GM or a head coaching candidate. But we do want to talk about some of the more important names that we think are realistic. We're going to talk about, who we think are the top 3 options, and then we'll do predictions for both. So what do you want to start with? Do you want to start with the coach or do you want to start with the GM? Because I feel like we should do GM just because they're probably going to do that hire first. What do you think?
I agree. Yes.
All right, so let's do the GM. So I'll read off the list, but we're not going to go into every candidate. So we have Alec Halby of the Philadelphia Eagles, Mike Borgonzi, who I feel like everyone just loves that name because he's Italian, the tri-state area, from the Kansas City Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
We have Ray Farmer from the Rams, also former Browns GM. We have Louis Riddick from ESPN, and who hasn't really worked in a front office a long time. Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl, John Robinson, Thomas Dimitroff, both are former GMs who are not currently employed by NFL teams. We have the fear factor, Ryan Grigson of the Minnesota Vikings. We have Mike Greenberg, not the one from Get Up, from Tampa Bay. We have Trey Brown from Cincinnati, John Eric Sullivan from Green Bay, Brian Gain from Buffalo, Chris Spielman from Detroit, Darren Moogie, who I actually don't remember where he's from. If you could correct me, that'd be great. And Lance Newmark from Washington. So where's Darren Moogie from? I can't remember. But
I actually don't know either. We should look him up though.
All right. Anyway,
but he's one that probably a long shot to get the job anyway. But
okay. But anyway, so
he's from Denver.
Denver. Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. So the one thing I'll say is, and I know they've been getting clowned like basically since the moment all these interviews started coming, is I think the approach of just talking to a lot of different people and getting a lot of different perspectives is good. And I know it sounds stupid, like why are you wasting everyone's time? Is like the 33rd team getting paid by the hour, by the interview? Who knows? It doesn't really matter. It's not our money. It's not our time. We as fans just want this to happen because we want to know like the direction of the franchise. But I think having different perspectives of people who are currently working in teams in different roles, people who have worked for teams, people who like never have worked for a team. I think Jim Nagy, he might have. I don't even know. But the point is that they're taking the search seriously. They understand that this last era of Jets football was terrible, and they need to, have some perspective, have ideas, and figure out what's the best approach for this team to go forward. So as annoying as it is that they're interviewing everybody and anybody, I still think it's good to go through the rounds. And the Bears are doing it too. So I feel like people are losing sight of that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're obviously taking the term like casting a wide net to the next level, but I also think it's good. And I think as a Jets fan base, we're just impatient by nature. Plus, you have the feeling that, listen, this head coach and GM openings have both been open since before the season ended, right? So it's just going to kind of lead to that impatience growing a little bit faster. Mm-hmm. I'm just looking at the tracker. They started their first interview was with Thomas Dimitroff back on December 16th. So it's been a full month, right, that this process has been going on. But I do think it's good that they are really going through this with a fine-tooth comb. I mean, the last couple head coach and really GM hires, right, they haven't nailed. This isn't like they've succeeded in spite of themselves. They've simply missed, right? So I think it's very good that they're being thorough with this. I think they're learning from, the Adam Gase. They're learning from Mike McCagnon. They're learning from Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, obviously. So this is good that they're talking to both experienced people and first-time people. It's good that they're being thorough in this process and really going through this with a fine-tooth comb, hopefully to get it right. And from everything we hear, and, the self-reflection could come into question here, but I think they think this is a desirable spot. So they're waiting for people. It's a privilege to coach and to be GM of this team. They're waiting for people to wow them. And I think that's ultimately a good thing. Now, having said that, I do think that in the next couple days to a week here, we're really going to start getting into crunch time. And the last thing you want to do is be on the outside looking in at a candidate that you really wanted to hire. So you see like the Titans that are going through their second rounds right now, like when are the Jets going to get to that next step? Because that's where we should be at this point.
Yeah, totally. So let's do it. Let's do each of our top three. I'm going to do two people probably with no experience as an actual general manager. I'll do one that does. So for my one candidate that does have experience, I'm going to say it's Dimitroff. And I think, and this isn't in order, these are just preferences. And the reason I like him is I think that he did a really good job in Atlanta. I think it probably ran its course. He was there for a long time. I think he was there from 2008. So when Matt Ryan was a rookie, to I think whenever they hired Arthur Smith, so like 13 years, 2021. That's like a long time in the NFL in like any job capacity. That's not like it was
08 to 20.
Oh, so yeah, so like I said, 13 seasons, 12 years, whatever you want to say. So I think he has an impressive resume. I know obviously he hasn't worked in a front office for a while, but he has kept busy with like an analytics company, which I think is good. I don't think they're going to hire him because we haven't heard much about it since they met with him about a month ago, which is crazy. It's been that long. So I like him just because I think he drafted good players. He hired Mike Smith and he hired Dan Quinn, both of whom had success. I mean, I wasn't the biggest Mike Smith fan, but he made the playoffs a few times. They had some good years. And then obviously Dan Quinn, who, started off his tenure with the Falcons as like really strong, made the playoffs a few times, obviously made the Super Bowl, and they infamously blew that game. But I'm not going to put that on the GM. But like he accumulated a lot of talent. He eyed a franchise quarterback in his first crack at it, which is important because like whoever this is going to have a swing at that at some point, whether it's in 2025, 2026, or even 2027. We have no idea how they're going to approach it because we don't know what they're hiring. So he's my one candidate that I really like with experience. And then in terms of the guys who don't have experience, I would say my top two, and I can't say that I know too much about them. I would say it's Halaby and Bergonzi. Greenberg was up there, but I really like some of the things I've been reading about Halaby, how he's just like a mixture of scouting analytics. I know CR has talked a lot about this on Badlands, and he's kind of swayed me. So I did some digging on him, and I think that he has an interesting background. And I know there's plenty of people that are like, we don't need to hire somebody from the Eagles again. It's like, not everybody's the same. Just like hire a defensive coordinator who's never been a head coach before. It doesn't mean they're going to be Robert Saleh. Doesn't mean they're going to be Todd Bowles. So I think everyone needs to relax with that. And then Bergonzi, I think it's just because he's worked his way up throughout that Chiefs organization. And I think that if you are stick around that long and like you have all these different, roles within an organization's front office, I just feel like you probably have a good approach of how everything needs to work and the people you want to surround yourself with. So that's why I really like him. And Greenberg, I would say, is the honorable mention who I like. I don't think he's necessarily a personnel guy, but he'd be interesting. He kind of seems like a more fun version of Idzik based on what I have heard about him. So those are my three. Let's do yours, and then we can talk about some of the guys because I'm sure there's some overlapping candidates here.
Yeah, actually, we're gonna go chalk. And if I were to say a top three, and honestly, like a 3A and 3B, it'd be those top four. I would say like how we would rank them. I'd say Bergonzi is my top guy.
Okay.
I think followed by Dimitrov, and then I'd go Halaby as like a 3A and a Greenberg 3B. Bergonzi, I like the fact that he's, an upstater. I like the fact that he spent so much time with the Chiefs organization, who are clearly a successful organization, right? They've done things the right way. And I think there's a little trepidation just because, you feel that, okay, they have Mahomes and he can kind of cover up a lot of holes, but at the same time, like you don't have that kind of sustained success by accident. So him being there, with the people in the Kansas City organization, like he clearly knows how to build it. And I think that's good. Dimitrov, I think, is kind of like, I think the reason he's my two is he's kind of the perfect blend of everything. Like, I don't want to throw caution to the wind and put too much emphasis on having experience over whatever the candidate, whatever else the candidate would bring. But I do feel like he brings both of those things, right? He was successful as a GM in Atlanta. Yep. He's taken time away from the game. He's done things to in analytics to see what he did wrong and maybe advance things that were falling short in his prior life. Mm-hmm. And he's come back. And I think that it kind of blends like an exciting hire and a different approach with the experience of doing it before. So I think if you couple him with a rookie head coach, that could kind of be a really good mix. Halaby, listen, for all intents and purposes, like you can't just draw the tie between him and Joe Douglas simply because they came from the Eagles organization, but you do have to look at what Howie Roseman has done in Philly, and like you have to give credit to that, right? Yeah. So someone coming up through those ranks and doing what he did, I like that idea, and I think that's kind of a different hire that I could really get behind. And then Greenberg, I like the fact that he's kind of more of a cap guy just because of the situation that the Jets are in right now and the dead money that they're going to have to deal with over the next few years. And I think bringing a guy like him, who obviously grew up a Jets fan and I think he's a Long Island native, if I'm not mistaken, but grew up on Long Island, graduated from Cornell, like all this stuff. Like I like that idea. And I tell you, we kind of went chalk here, and we obviously agree, so that doesn't make for the best talking points here and back and forth. But you kind of look at it too, and you say the guys that you really don't want. And I think Grigson is at the top of that list. So the GM candidates, I think, are a different story for me, where as long as they don't go that route, I think I can sell myself on anyone, really. Yeah,
I feel like he's really, if I had to look at this list because the guys who don't have experience, you really can't make true definitive statements for. And that's something that's bothered me throughout this entire, Jets hiring cycle, is that people are so passionate one way or the other about candidates, mainly the ones who don't have experience. If they have experience, I think you could be a little bit more passionate about where you stand with them. Like I think all the criticism and, fear that Jet fans have about Ryan Grigson is so valid. And like, look, they could hire him. And if they did, I know Joe talked about this, it's like, I'm rooting for him to do the best job he can. I'm gonna be like, I'll be angry in the moment, just like when they hired Adam Gase. I don't think it's as bad, but it is kind of like on level. It's like we saw some bad things, like we just don't want to, sign ourselves up for that. But I would say just you're being disingenuous, being like, one thing about these guys who've never done it before. Like with Dimitrov, with Ray Farmer, Riddick, you really can't say much because he hasn't worked in a front office in a while. And then obviously Grigson, it's like we have some sample size to work with here. So I mean, some of the other interesting names, I think Trey Brown is interesting. I think Brian Gaines interesting because they come from teams that have built really nice programs in the last few years with Buffalo and Cincinnati. I mean, again, it's just so hard. It's such a crapshoot. Some guys, they either get it or they don't. And I think right now it's like if they hire someone without experience, it's like, did they get the Borgonzis of the world? Did they get Halaby? Did they get Grieber? Like, to me, you get any of those three guys, it's good process. If you go with someone like Ray Farmer, who has experience for 2 years in Cleveland, I'm not going to be happy, but it's not Grigson anger. And I don't think this guy has a realistic shot, but I do like that he's been one of the assistants to Les Snead, who's been awesome. I mean, like, look at that Rams defense we saw on Monday against Minnesota. Like, they made Sam's life hell. Feel bad for him because everyone's kind of going back to like ripping on him like they used to when he was with the Jets. But he's somebody, like, if they did roll the dice with him, I wouldn't be as upset. I'm not saying I want him, but somebody I could sell myself on who has experience. But
I think, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just like, I feel like a lot of these guys, it's just like courtesy interviews for their agents. I don't know.
Agreed. And I feel like the number of people that I would be genuinely pissed off if they brought on as GM is smaller than that of the head coaching list.
Totally.
Right? Like,
yeah.
I would really be upset if it were a John Robinson or a Ryan Grigson, but I could talk myself into a lot of these guys. John Eric Sullivan, you hear a lot of good things about him in Green Bay, pounding the table for Jordan Love, things like that. Brian Gain, Chris Spielman, a lot of these guys, I could really, like you said, Ray Farmer, I could get behind. I could see where they were coming from. This doesn't have the pendulum swing, I think, that is on the other side with the head coach candidates. That's for sure.
Yep, that's for sure. Okay, so we will now move to the head coach candidates. We are going to skip over Vrabel just because at this point he's been hired by the Patriots, which we all were excited when they met with him early. They met with him before even 2025 hit. It seemed like there was legitimate interest, and I know Zach, our good Badlands friend, said that the interest was legit, and he was close to Vrabel. So I do believe that, but he also cautioned everyone, saying that if this job became open from New England, probably a good chance he takes it. He's not coming to the Jets, so it sucks. I really wanted him. He was my top choice up until he came off the board, but I kind of was never really optimistic he would take the job because I always was thinking in the back of my mind that Mayo was going to be one and done. Lo and behold, he was. So we'll go through the other list. We start off with former Jet Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator of the Lions, Bobby Slowick, who they met with today, offensive coordinator of the Texans, Joe Brady, Buffalo, Vance Joseph, Denver, Arthur Smith, the guy I think everyone is so terrified of them hiring, Pittsburgh, Ron Rivera, not working right now, Sexy Rexy, who we already basically know that he is not going to get the job because it sounds like he went into the meeting without having a plan. So that's funny, but apparently Boy loves him.
Dude, trust me, I got it.
Huge dude, trust me vibes. But love Rex. Sorry, Rex, just stay on TV.
Yes.
Or you could work in the front office and do some sort of consulting. I don't care, whatever. Brian Greasy, which I thought was the most mind-boggling at the time, but then there's been other ones that have came out since. But interesting, he works with quarterbacks. I can't fully write it off. Brian Flores, McCown, both from Minnesota. Darren Rizzi, the Rizzler, as I say, Jersey native from New Orleans. I thought he actually did a decent job in New Orleans, but I don't want them to hire him. I think he'd be better suited maybe to be our special teams coordinator because Brant Boyer has survived far too many regimes to still be here. Spags, who I feel like was a courtesy interview to get his name out there. Loxley, that was the one that I'm like, what are we doing here? The only logical explanation here is that he's potentially going to be an offensive coordinator for one of the candidates. I don't really get it. The guy's not a good coach in his current role. He's coached in the NFL, I think, briefly. I think most of his times in college. It made no sense. And then Joe Witt, who was an interesting one that I wasn't expecting, and Jeff Hafley, also interesting one, who apparently Packer fans don't want to lose, has head coaching experience at the college level, not at the NFL level. But those are our guys until we hear about 5 more tomorrow. So since I started, who are your top 3? And you could do a 3B if you want. So you want 3A and 3B.
Okay. Top 3, I think, and I tweeted this out the other day, as time has gone on and as this has dragged on further and further, I think for me, Aaron Glenn has really separated himself as my one. I just think first of all, drafted by the Jets, played 8 years here, was definitely a Pro Bowler. I'm not sure if he was an All-Pro one year.
He was a Pro Bowler.
Pro Bowler 98, not an All-Pro. But either way, he's a Jet. He wants to be here. He's arguably the hottest candidate, him and Ben Johnson, on the market.
Yep.
Is a Parcells disciple. Rich Cimini has talked about that. He and Parcells continue to, they talk once a week, continues that relationship. I think that those ties are strong, and that obviously tugs at the heartstrings of a lot of Jets fans, myself included. So throughout the course of this process and seeing what Detroit has done and hearing everything that those players and Dan Campbell have said and how integral a part of that process Aaron Glenn has been, he has really kind of separated himself as the clear-cut number one candidate, to the point where there's other candidates that I'd be happy with, but I would really be disappointed if he doesn't end up being the head coach of the Jets. 2 for me is Brian Flores. I think you and I, over the course of the last few shows that we've done, we've talked about him a lot. I think I would be happy with Brian Flores. I think what he did in Miami was pretty impressive. I think the way it ended was obviously odd, right, to say the least. But the fact that he went to work for Mike Tomlin, that holds a lot of weight for me. And that the fact that he's done incredible things in Minnesota over the last 2 years and working for arguably one of the top 5 coaches in the NFL now, and Kevin O'Connell, and that offensive mind, that really, that bears a lot for me. And I like Flores a lot. I like the fact that, similar to Dimitrov, that kind of molds, like, that's the perfect blend of experience, taking some time away, doing things that are a little bit different than what you were doing prior, and then coming back and having a second shot at it. 3rd for me, I think, would be Josh McCown. And I think he was that close to getting it in Houston. I think this could be the swing where, and I know Connor and Joe, talked about it, where you'd rather be a year early on a guy than a year late and miss out. And I think Josh McCown, well respected in the Jets building. I think, people obviously love him. He loved his time here. I think that for me is extremely important. So I think Josh McCown could be kind of that guy that comes out of left field a little bit, but really wows. And I think ultimately Jets fans would be happy, and I'd be in that mix. If I were to say a 3B, I'd probably go with Joe Brady, although I'm a little bit colder on him than I think a lot of other people are. I don't know. I like what he's done in Buffalo, clearly. But you also have Josh Allen. You have to take that into consideration as well. But he has done amazing things in Buffalo. But I wouldn't be upset with a guy like Brady either.
Yeah, no, it's
Yours.
totally. That's
What do you
good
got?
stuff. So unfortunately, 1 and 2 are the same. It's both Glennon and Flores. I'll talk a little bit about both of them, but I do want to talk about my other options. So over the last 24 hours, I've done some reading, and Jeff Hafley has emerged as number 3 for me. The reason I like it is I think that he is an up-and-comer in the NFL coaching world. I think, what's his face? Matt LaFleur has a good eye for coaching talent. He's brought in a lot of good guys. I'm not trying to say Nate Hackett or anything, but I like that this guy's coached before and recently as a head coach. I know it was at the college level. It's not the same thing, but he has experience at least being in the Big Chair. And Boston College is, it's not a powerhouse program, but it's still an ACC school. It's still like they care about their football there. So I think it's interesting that he's taken that job. And obviously now Bill O'Brien has that job, which is so funny. So I feel like with the success he had in the Packers, I don't think the Jets are going to hire him, but the fact that he had a lot of success early with that defense, considering how their old defensive coordinator, every single person wanted him fired. I forgot his name. He used to be with the Rams too. I feel like he's going to be a guy a year from now that people are going to say, this guy is one of the hottest candidates on the market. Because I feel like Green Bay is going to get better next year, specifically defensively. They'll probably get some pass rushers and whatnot. I think he's interesting. I do like McCown, but again, the lack of experience really coaching in the NFL is tough for me. And coaching in general, because he was coaching high school prior to being in the NFL. But I wouldn't get upset if they hired him. He was Jet, and he just has the personality. He is the connection to this generation of players because he played recently. So I like the idea of him. And then I do like Brady as well. But like you said, it's is it Josh Allen? It seems like every time he's been really good, it's because he had Josh Allen with the Bills, and then he obviously had Joe Burrow when he was in LSU. He was okay when he was with Carolina with Teddy Bridgewater, I think in that first year, and that's why the Jets ended up meeting with him in 2021. I kind of feel similarly to him as I do Ben Johnson. I just feel like they might be perfectly suited in their roles. And it's not to say they can't be good head coaches. I just don't know. But I wouldn't if they hired him, I'd be excited about it. I'd be interested. But in terms of the guys I don't want, Nagy's really high up there. I think Nagy is just scary just because I've seen a lot of stuff from listening to Part of My Take and talking to some Bears fans. Tommy, if you're watching, he's been on our show before. He's a big Bears fan, does content for them. And he just says it's just he doesn't know how to run the operation. Like the players like him, but it's not the right guy. And I don't think he has the temperament for New York. Arthur Smith, similar thing. It's like kind of Adam Gase. Like he's not like a dick. It's just I feel like he will be 7-10 every single year, similar to Robert Saleh. It's just like offensive version of Robert Saleh. And obviously Vance Joseph is a little bit scary. But I do want to talk about Flores and Glenn. So you hit on a lot of good things with Glenn. And besides all that, the connection to the team, he like apparently wants to be here, which I had taken a little excerpt from Kaz's paywall article yesterday. Excuse me, I couldn't think of what it was. And everyone's getting hyped because it seems like we're the job that he wants if he gets offered, which is awesome, over New Orleans, because it seems like there's been concern that he would take New Orleans over us. But he started his career with the Jets. I don't think he ever played for the Saints. He only coached there, so I feel like it's a different type of connection. I watched that interview, and I think Jesus, who's in here, he shared it in the Discord from when he was on the Pivot podcast about 2 years ago. If you watch that interview, this is long before he was like a hotshot coordinator candidate. I think the Lions were just starting to turn it around when they started like 1-6 in 2022. That made me really like what he has to do. He talked about his entire background working in the NFL. Like he basically, after he retired, he owned a bunch of restaurants in Texas. And then he was saying how he was like bored and his wife's like, go coach. And that's what led him to becoming a scout with the Jets. And then obviously he did that. And then he was an assistant coach. He did like safeties. And then he ended up becoming, a defensive coordinator. Now, obviously he's trying to be a head coach. I just think all that experience that he had starting at the bottom, I think he was a quality control coach, all the way to like potentially becoming a head coach and obviously playing. To me, that speaks a lot of volumes. And I like that he's a former player. I feel like you're just seeing this trend that former players are succeeding more and more as head coaches. So that's my feelings on him. And then Flores, I always was, from afar impressed with what he did in Miami. I know that there's obviously the stuff with Tua. It seems like he could be very brash, but like if you watch the Jets this past year with Ulbrich as the coach, and with all due respect to Ulbrich, like he seems like a genuinely good guy. He was a good defensive coordinator, just couldn't be a head coach. I don't want to trash him. I don't dislike the guy. He was in a bad spot. Flores is exactly what this team needs because it seems like they could just do whatever they want. They were supposed to coach themselves. And it just doesn't seem like there's the right leadership in place. And that's why things really spiraled out of control this past year. So I think he deserves a second chance. Coach under Tomlin, coach under O'Connell, like you said. I'm very interested in him. I'm just curious what that offensive staff's going to look like. Hopefully it'll be McCown. So yeah, that was a long-winded way of me talking about my stuff, but those are my candidates that I like.
No, I agree. And I think, you see kind of the pendulum swing with every hire, right? And you date back to Mangini, right? And he was kind of that straight-faced, very emotionless, from the Belichick tree, disciplinarian, right? You go from him then to Rex Ryan. And Rex was loud and boisterous and confident and cocky and like a great, podium interview and like all this stuff. And then, that time, obviously that ran a little thin and that got tired. And then you go from him to Bowles, and Bowles was stoic and, a decent coach, but honestly, he wasn't even a decent coach when he was here. He had one good season and then the rest were god awful. And then you go from Bowles and then, okay, now the pendulum has to swing over to the offensive side of the ball. And that's what we're trying to get. And we interviewed Monken and we interviewed Matt Rule. And then they get out the door. Cliff Kingsbury, they get out the door and you pivot to Gase. And then Gase was god awful. So we were all excited about Robert Saleh and the emotion that he brings on the sidelines and the things that he can do and how involved he is and how amped up he got. And we all got really crazy about that because that was the anti-Gase. But then what you learned from Robert Saleh was, okay, he had that, but did he really have the accountability, disciplinarian factor that I think this team obviously really needs? And the leader of men quality, I think you're really going to get with both Aaron Glenn and Brian Flores. I think the accountability piece you're really going to get. You brought it up with Flores. I think our friend Will Pa had Rich Cimini on Badlands this past week. Rich Cimini really talked about Aaron Glenn and not being afraid of confrontation and his accountability. Aaron Glenn coming to the podium and saying, I'm a football coach. I'll spend as much time with the offense as I do with the defense. All those things are the things that we've grown to learn from this 14-year drought, where all we're doing is we're looking for a coach that's going to be a football coach, that's going to have accountability, that's going to get us back to the playoffs. And I really do. I would be extremely happy with both Aaron Glenn or Brian Flores. I think they kind of encapsulate everything that we're looking for and kind of, lift up those shortcomings of the coaching predecessors that they do have, which is really what we're looking for. Every time, we learn a little bit more. So on top of those things, on top of accountability, on top of being a leader of men, I think the other thing that we found is really important, right, is what staff that they're going to bring. So obviously that is going to be a major question mark with any of these candidates, right, is kind of what the offensive and defensive staff are going to look like. You go back to even the Robert Saleh hire, right? I think it probably doesn't get talked about enough, but how much when you brought Saleh on, rookie head coach, very young rookie offensive coordinator, really outside of an interim, but you had a rookie defensive coordinator in Jeff Ulbrich.
Yep.
I don't know if we talk enough about how much the death of Greg Knapp impacted that team, like being that kind of senior leader, the voice in the room, the guy that has coached. I think he coached Steve Young, right? He coached Peyton Manning. Like he was going to be that guy. And that's why there was talks about Robert Saleh having conversations with Gary Kubiak to come in and be that guy, to be kind of that senior offensive mind, like just that adult in the room that we always spoke about. So I think that kind of just sheds light on how important the staff that any of these guys bring in would be. And if it's going to be a rookie head coach like Aaron Glenn, who does he bring in either on the offensive side of the ball or maybe someone even on the defensive side of the ball that he has history with, that has that kind of senior coaching experience that would be important, that he could kind of bounce ideas off of and lean on in the tough times that are sure to come at some point, being a Jets head coach.
Yeah, it will not be easy in this market, but I feel like he just has the ability to handle it, just because he stood in front of those cameras. He answered questions after tough losses. He was on the team when Kotite was coaching, so he's been through the lowest of lows as a Jets player, so he gets it. I just feel like he's the kind of guy that will really get the fan base excited. I just don't want them to overthink this, and I feel like they are with all these damn interviews. I do think, this is just my opinion, I feel like the GM interview is going to happen soon. I feel like I think maybe by like end of day Monday, it might happen. I feel like there'll be some second round interviews this weekend. Head coach, maybe like a week, maybe in like a week, we'll probably hear. But I do think this is going to get resolved sooner than people think. But again, they may interview more guys and put in some requests. I mean, I don't understand why they're not meeting with Liam Cohen. That doesn't make sense to me.
That is interesting.
Same thing. I mean, it could be the Ben Johnson thing, which seems to be sourced that he just told them, I'm not interested, which is, it's fine. It's just like, why are we not hearing about it?
Same with Matt Campbell. Right? Yeah. Like Matt Campbell, we've heard that he would be open to it. And he's someone the Jets requested, I think, for both of the last coaching cycles, and he declined them. So it's odd to me that the as wide of a net that they are casting, that he's not even on the interview list. That was strange.
But my thing is, like, if you're going to do a college coach, why are you bringing Loxley? Like, talk to Steve Sarkisian, talk to Kirby Smart, talk to Ryan Day, talk to any of like the top guys. I just don't get it.
That one was that wins for most odd and out of left field for all of these interviews that they've done.
Okay, so let's do predictions. Who do you think will be the next general manager of the New York Jets?
I think it's Mike Bergonzi.
Okay,
I really do, and I think we're going to end up. Maybe I don't know how you're going to go here, but I think I end up going chalk a little bit. But I think that's kind of been the first name that we've heard. I think being New York, upstate tri-state guy wanting to be here. I think this is a desirable position for any GM, but I just feel like that's where it's going to go. I think that's the first name that Cimini said back in December when we first started talking about this. And I just feel like sometimes that sticks. I'm not buying into the Grigson hype, or I think that was kind of overblown. I think, and if there is, we'll go back to another point, but if there is really ties where it's like Flores and only Grigson, that makes me want Flores a lot less. But I do think that ultimately where this shakes out is in the next couple of days, and we hire Mike Bergonzi.
Okay. And what about head coach?
Aaron Glenn.
Okay.
It just it makes too much sense not to. He is the top candidate. He has said that he wants to be here. He is a former Jet. Everything, reading all the tea leaves, like it has to happen. It's got to be. And I said it earlier. I'm happy with Flores or one of the other guys, but I'll be really disappointed if it isn't Aaron Glenn. I've sold myself on him.
Okay. So I agree with you. I think it's going to be Aaron Glenn, but I don't know about Bergonzi. I feel like he might take the Titans job. He took a second interview with them. That's where I think he's going. I think it's going to be Greenberg. I think it's going to be the homecoming. I think it's going to be an interesting mix of former player, analytics guy, and I think that Greenberg will probably bring someone who has experience in the big chair. I would love John Dorsey. That would be the really fun hire, and I was hoping they would talk to him. I could see Glenn being like, can you bring him in to be your right-hand guy to help with personnel since you're more of a cap guy? That's my prediction. I think Dorsey ends up joining the front office, so they have someone with experience to help him as he learns on the job. And I'm interested in who like the staff would be. Do you have any like predictions of who you think the offensive coordinator might be?
I really don't. I mean, you look at the Lions staff, but I would assume that wherever Ben Johnson goes, he probably takes, people with him there. So it's honestly interesting. And I really liked your idea. I'm sure you were just throwing stuff out there, but John Morton. I mean, let's look back on 2017 and like how wildly and weirdly fun that season was, in a season with no expectations. But I think you kind of read the tea leaves there and saw that there was some lineup between twice. Yeah, there was an overlap with John Morton. So I kind of like that. But yeah, I have no idea what Aaron Glenn's staff would look like. But I think obviously, as we just spoke about, it'd be important to know.
I would say another interesting name, which I threw out in the Discord as well, Scotty Montgomery, who's I believe he's the assistant head coach of the Lions. He's an offensive guy. I think he used to coach running backs. I don't know what his actual title is now, but I know he's the assistant head coach. He'd be an interesting guy because maybe he wants the opportunity to call plays. So that's somebody I would say is interesting. Maybe a former teammate of Aaron Glenn's. I don't know.
Would Aaron Glenn work with Josh McCown?
Yeah. Who knows? They're in the same division.
I mean, if Flores doesn't get a job in this cycle, and Josh McCown's still stuck in Minnesota, but he wants a chance to call plays, like would Aaron Glenn work with him? Who knows?
It's very possible.
That would be cool. That's the dream right there.
I'm sure
Josh McCown running the offense, Aaron Glenn head coach.
Yeah.
Bergonzi or Greenberg is GM. I like that.
I love that Victor Green's been like actively, advocating for him. It'd be cool if they put him on the staff, like maybe be an assistant.
Bring the whole band back. Let's get Otis Smith back in there. Let's get Marcus Coleman back. Ray Mickens, everybody. Mo Lewis coach the linebackers. Man, that's bring the Anthony Pleasant. Who else we got? Jason Ferguson. I'll name them all day. Let's go.
Look, that's what the Lions did. They got all these former players on the staff. It's working really well. It seems like it's resonating with their players. So I would not hate that kind of approach. And I feel like there would be a bunch of former players on the staff if Glenn got the job. So
Marvin Jones. He was one of the first jerseys. Marvin Jones, Mo Lewis, and Aaron Glenn. The first 3 jerseys I ever had.
Yeah. It'd be fun then.
I'll get another Aaron Glenn one if he comes back. We're doing it.
Get the throwback on eBay.
Yes, sir.
I feel like now with Fanatics, they probably would do like a special, like they would make like a throwback and like sell it there, and then people would start buying it.
Yeah.
Cool. So this was fun. It's been a bit. We do appreciate everyone for being patient with us. A lot going on in our lives, but I do want to talk to you about Rodgers, even though like it's we don't know. He was on McAfee today. It seems like he's saying it's up to the new hires. He said he wants to talk to the new GM, but what's your prediction? Do you think you can give me multiple options. Do you think he's either A, retiring, B, playing for the Jets, or C, playing and not for the Jets? What do you think ends up happening with him?
I think he retires, and I think he kind of leaves it open to, I'll return in the right situation if there's an injury in training camp or even early part of the season, and some desperate team that has Super Bowl aspirations, they give him a call and maybe he comes back. I think he's done playing. I think watching the things that I did after the Miami game, it just seems like he's a guy that is on his way out and ready to hang him up. The only thing that gives me pause is just the way that he is and the ego that we know he has going out like this, a 5-12 year with Super Bowl expectations, like just doesn't seem like the way he'd want to go out. At the same time, he got beat up this year and it was tough. And I don't know if you want to go through that whole grind again, but yeah, I think ultimately, I think he hangs him up and, maybe leaves that shred of hope if someone goes down and he can come back.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. Like, why do you want to keep getting hit, man? He's going to be 42. Like, that's just not fun. Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think secretly he does want to try to play again, but like, it's just, I think the league is kind of passing him by at this point. He can't move around like he used to. I mean, like, that Miami game was just like, it just felt like it was like his, I said this like when Kobe's last game, when he scored 60 points instead of like a million shots. It's like they like just let him have his day. Like Miami, I feel like wasn't even trying. It was like whatever. But yeah, it's just time to move on. And I know there's been a lot of discourse the past month. Not as much since the coaching stuff started, but like is Tyrod really a better option? I'm like, no, that's not the point. It's about cleansing yourself from this regime and this era. It's like, there's no point of making him the quarterback when you're trying to start a whole new era of Jets football. It's like, yeah, he's probably the best option they have, but it's not about that. It's about building something new and having the guys who are going to be here, which, by the way, we have an offensive line, which is awesome. That's like the one thing that I'm like, people are not talking about that enough nationally. Like Jeff fans know, but like 4 to 5 pieces are solidified long term. And I would imagine they should try to bring back Morgan Moses, but you could easily take someone with this draft pick. I mean, if they don't take like a defensive player, which I kind of want them to do, but if they took an offensive lineman like Kelvin Banks or the guy Will Campbell from LSU, I'm not going to be mad. It's just it's a smart play because they just need one more piece, and then they could have we could be sitting pretty for 10 years. It could be like the boys are back from 2006.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you that, going back to the initial point. Like, I think I know where your head is at, but you are adamantly like, you don't want Rodgers back. Is there any way of convincing you otherwise? Let's put it that way.
I mean, if the coach is the guy who wants him, like, yeah, but like, I just don't think it makes sense because you're just kicking the can down the road. It's like, eventually you need to do this. So like, just do it now. It's like, why are you going to hire new people who could basically mold this team in any way that they want to do with a piece from the old regime that's old? It's not like my thinking is it's not like Alex Smith. Like, think about it like this. Remember when Jim Harbaugh got the 49ers job and Alex Smith was like a depreciated asset? People thought like they should get rid of him and start over. But he was just like, he was young and he still was like not like washed up. So it's like, all right, Jim Harbaugh's like, I'll give it a shot. If not, I'll move on. And he ended up having a career year. So, and then that ultimately got him to Kansas City, and he had some good years there too. So it's just, when the guy's old, it just doesn't make any sense. And all the dead money that you're just kicking down the road, just wipe it clean, take your medicine, and then move on and either draft somebody in day 2, because I don't think they're going to take someone in day 1 just based on it only being really 2 guys. They're going to go probably 1-2 or 1-3, depending on what happens with Cleveland. Yeah. But yeah, it just doesn't make sense. It's not that it's like, if it happened, what am I going to do? I'm going to be mad. I'll be like, I'll live with it, but it just doesn't make any sense logically for where this team is going. Yeah. Like, they're not winning a Super Bowl next year. They're not. So everyone get it out of your head. It's not happening.
I know. That's not the goal. Goal is just get back to the playoffs. Like, that's all we want. End this drought. Let's stop talking about it. But no, I think I'm with you. I think the longer that I was a big believer at the start of the season, like, simply having Aaron Rodgers should get you 4 or 5 more wins and get you into the conversation. Like, just swapping him out for Zach Wilson. And I think
it got you 2 less wins.
Exactly. And I looked at that like in a vacuum where everything else stays constant, but clearly the defense took some significant steps back. The losses on the defensive line, I think, were a lot more than what anyone could have really predicted. I think we all knew that it would take a step back just with the loss of some, Bryce Huff, John Franklin Myers. I don't think anybody envisioned Hassan Reddick being what he was. But the fact that they did it and went 5-12, I think you can point to the numbers for Aaron Rodgers and say, like, okay, yeah, I mean, you have a legitimate case to bring him back. But anyone who watched every game like we did, I don't know how you can really say that. And then the other thing for me is I'm a Jets fan. So obviously, I admit that, I deal with emotion here, right? Like, you're not just completely objective. There is emotional ties here. And Garrett Wilson is extremely important to me and to this team, I think, into the future. And watching how that played out at the end with him and Devontae and Garrett Wilson kind of be on the outside looking in, I put that importance, like the importance of Garrett Wilson, over the importance of, having Aaron Rodgers and Devontae here next year. I think there's something to be said for just, like you said, clean slating it, getting rid of the stink, getting your core guys, having them be the most important pieces. And I do think that, like, if you go with a Tyrod and Travis and a mid to late round rookie and see what you have there, I think there's success that can be had. I think they can be a 9 or 10 win team and make some noise and maybe get back to the dance and have a shot to do something. And, I think ultimately I'm with you. If a new head coach comes in and he says, no, I want Aaron here for 2025, I'll back that, obviously. But I think where my head's at, as much as I enjoyed Aaron Rodgers and the McAfee and stuff like that, like it wore thin, and I'm ready to just move on and clean slate it and be done and turn the page. I think you're right. You got to wash the stink off of this last year.
Yeah. I said this probably like a month or 2 ago. The model for the Jets next year is to be the 2017 Bills. Tyrod was also the quarterback. True. They had a surprisingly frisky, fun year. They made the playoffs. They did not win a playoff game. They lost, I think, 7-3 to Buffalo. To Jacksonville.
Oh, yeah.
My point is, and then they got
Josh Allen. That was a Nathan Peterman game, right? They benched Tyrod for Nathan Peterman in the wild card.
So I don't know about that. No, he got hurt.
Tyrod got hurt, and Nathan Peterman threw.
No, they benched him in the middle of the season.
That's right. You're okay. I'm sorry. Yeah,
I'm
going back to the Music City Miracle where they benched Doug Flutie for Rob Johnson in the playoff game. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
Yeah, but my point is that that's the model for the Jets. It's like build something and then hopefully get your quarterback in 2026 for the future. That's what I want them to do. I think it makes the most sense. I think people should be surprised. Like it'll literally, if Tyrod's the quarterback, like you will be very surprised of how good this offense will be. I mean, he moved right down the field on Buffalo to pull the times he was out there. So
yeah, I'd be happy with Tyrod and Travis and a rookie as starting quarterback in 2025. I think that'd be a good QB room. I think you got a good offensive line. I think depending on the staff that can utilize Breece Hall in the run game and the pass game, like you look at what Breece Hall can do versus what his stats actually were, and his lack of utilization is painful. And that's, you talk about like a guy like Arthur Smith and what he did with Bijan Robinson, and then you watch what Bijan did this year. Like that's the stuff that gives you nightmares. Like that's a nightmare hire for them. But yeah, we're going off on a lot of different tangents, but that's I think you rid yourself of Rodgers, Bergonzi or Greenberg, Aaron Glenn, top choice. Let's roll. And I'm back in. They pulled me back in.
We got one comment from somebody that I want to talk about before we go.
Let's go.
Nagy. He says, Scott Wilson says, Nagy is an offensive coach who's had success with a below average quarterback who's been his coordinator for the last Super Bowl champions. What am I missing? So, one, he has not been the offensive coordinator the past two. Bieniemy was, I believe, 2 years ago. So that's one thing. He was on the staff. He's like an offensive assistant. Number two, he doesn't call the plays. That's Andy Reid. And number three, the success he had was basically 1 year, and then everything fell apart. And if you don't know that, go look. They basically backed into the playoffs in 2020, which was a weird year to begin with, and they were not a playoff team. They were lucky, and he benched Mitchell Trubisky for Nick Foles. He obviously isn't the worst offensive mind, but he just got in over his head, and he didn't know how to hire a proper staff. So that's my take. And their defense was actually really good in Chicago when he was there, much better than their offense.
I think you said that extremely well, and I would piggyback on that and just say dive into those Chicago seasons a little bit more than just looking at the surface. I think there's a story to be told there. We don't want Matt Nagy here. I think he would be a step above Gase and above Arthur Smith, but it's still not it's not the home run hire you're looking for to really rebuild and change this culture and get back to winning ways. That's not the guy.
Yeah, and Scott said fair enough. So he clearly appreciated that I took the time there. So any closing thoughts as we wrap up our first episode of 2025?
You know, midway through this 2024 season, I was down bad. And I said, it just makes everything not fun. It gives you no hope. It makes the offseason not fun because we've seen it. It makes the draft and training camp and mini camp and even the start early season success because we've seen it all and it's all collapsed and we've hit rock bottom. But God damn it, Steve, they pull me back in, man, every time. And I'm back on board. And I think it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks here, and hopefully we get this. We get our answers sooner rather than later. And like I said, I think if Aaron Glenn ends up being the head coaching hire, then I think I'm all the way back in, and I'm really excited for what 2025 can bring. How about you?
Same. I mean, look, my expectations aren't super high, so it's not like if they win 9 games, I'll be ecstatic next year. But the one thing I'll leave everybody with is this, and I've been saying this a lot, and it was a good piece that was in The Athletic that Mike Sando put about like total EPA per play on offense. All the head coaches are defensive coaches, or somebody who's never called plays was Dan Campbell, and that was the top 5 for 2024. So for anyone who's like so adamant about an offensive head coach, just look at that article. It came out the other day. It's very interesting. And I also think being able to call plays on offense doesn't make you a good head coach. And I feel like people lose sight of that all the time. It's good, but being a head coach is being the CEO. It's running the program, hiring the right people. It's connecting with players well. It's so much more than that. And I think people just need to understand that. And that's all I could say. So like if they hire a defensive head coach and you don't want that, just be more open-minded to it because it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to fail. There's plenty of good defensive head coaches in the history of the NFL, even right now. And people just don't want to admit it because Andy Reid obviously keeps winning Super Bowls. But there's only one Andy Reid. There's only one Sean McVay. There's a lot of people who are just trying to be them. Like Kevin O'Connell, great season, won 14 games. Guess what? Got his ass whooped in the wild card game. Doesn't mean shit.
Yep. Well said, Steve. I love it.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to this show on YouTube, youtube.com/@BadlandsTOJ, or on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts. Turn on the Jets Live. Just search it. You'll see our logo. We appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll do a show soon.